I'm Krishna Vedula, Chief Technology Officer at 365 Retail Markets. By show of hands, can you guys tell me how many of you have seen this movie? Okay, most of you know the theme, the story. The main character is a con artist, pretends to be a pilot, a doctor, a lawyer, and goes around the world spending forged checks and dating all these beautiful women. Um, but the reality of micro markets is that the thieves, the people that are taking product away from micro markets, are the average Joes, right? People like you and I go to work every day, try to make a living, and once in a while, when nobody is looking, they try to get away by stealing something, right? So, how big a problem is this for the industry? So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the annual report on micro markets and vending that comes out. Vending Market Watch is the organization that publishes that report. And they base it on feedback from the operators. When they surveyed the operators, shrink and theft was rated as the number 2 item. And on a different dimension, they said that's the hardest problem for them to solve. They can deal with the rest. So the focus of my presentation is theft in micro markets. I'm a numbers guy. So whenever I'm trying to look at a problem, trying to solve a problem, I look at data. And on the screen, you have 4 different numbers. I'm going to walk through each of them and explain the context just to establish how big a problem this could be. So the first number, 13 billion. That's the annual theft in retail, $13 billion. It takes an average shoplifter about 49 successful attempts before they are caught. 49 attempts. Don't try to test that theory once you go back, right? And even when they are caught, they are prosecuted only once for every 2 attempts they are caught, right? So, really, if you break it down, you can steal stuff about 100 times, and only once are you likely to face any consequences. And of course, that reflects in the previous number, $13 billion. People wouldn't be doing it if they can not get away with it. This is the range of shrink in micro markets, shrink, theft, right? One and the same. So really well organized, really well run markets, we see a shrink of about 1%, right? That's the left end of the spectrum, the really good end of the spectrum. And then you have really poorly run micro markets that have double-digit theft. So we've seen as high as 27% theft. So 1 in 3 products that you have is being stolen, and you're not doing anything about it, right? That's what we want to change at the end of this presentation. And this is the average revenue from a micro market. This is the average. Keep in mind, there are some markets that make a couple of $1 million, and there are some that make maybe 10, 15 grand, right? So 3% in a couple of $1 million market is a big number. Now, when you add all of this, it should give you the context. It should give you a perspective on the size of the problem, the magnitude of the problem. So let's take a couple of these numbers and see what it translates to. 5% theft in a $60,000 per annum type of market. So you're looking at about 3 grand of product that you're giving away, right? Somebody is stealing from you. Can you live with that? That's a question that all the operators should ask themselves, right? On the face of it, it might seem very simple. Somebody is stealing $3,000 worth of stuff from you. It's okay, I can live with it, right? That's the operating assumption. But that's just the beginning. It's a vicious cycle that starts with loss of product. You're losing money, you're not selling enough. So in order to make your bottom line, you increase the prices. Increase prices, that leads to a loss in sales and loss in customer satisfaction. And And funnily enough, when the prices start going up, people notice there is higher level of theft. The same can of Coke that was being sold for a dollar the previous day suddenly goes up to $1.10, and there's more theft, right? So it's not really just the product loss that we need to be worried about. It's the whole ecosystem that goes with it, and it's a vicious cycle. The sooner you break out of that cycle, the better off you'll be. So how does this theft happen? There are four main characters. There are four personas, if you may, of people that are stealing from micro markets. You have the walkouts. These are people that confidently walk into the micro market, just pick up the product, and walk away as if they own it, right? They don't even pretend to pay for it, scan it, or any such. Then you have the shoppers. They bring 10 products to the kiosk. They scan a couple of products, and then they walk away with the rest, right? So for all practical purposes, if you have a camera in the market, the camera, it appears as if they are paying for the product. You just don't know where the rest of the product is disappearing. And then you have vandals. I mean, I'm sure we've all done this too. From time to time when something doesn't work, a kiosk at an airport or some automated ATM even, it doesn't work, you tap it on the side, right? These guys take it to the next level. They pretend to scan the product, and they kick the kiosk, they shake it a little bit, sometimes they even break things, and then they just shrug their shoulders and walk away with the product, right? So the camera that's recording all of this, it looks like, oh, this guy tried to pay, or this gal tried to pay, but they could not because the system was down. And the worst one is the last, the canceller, right? These are people who are picking up the product. It looks like a genuine transaction. They scan it very diligently. They pretend to swipe the credit card, or sometimes they don't even do that, and they hit the cancel button, right? So the system registers all of it, but you don't know where the product is. And if you have a camera that's tracking all of this movement, you still can't catch them because you don't know what happened between the time they are standing at the kiosk and hitting something very discreetly, and they're walking away with the product, right? So there is a little bit of integration that needs to happen between the kiosk and the eyes in the sky for you to be able to figure this out, right? And of course, there are several variants, right? Your own employees, I mean, the route drivers, the technicians that are going there, the market liaison on the site, whether it's a HR or a facilities employee, they could be stealing too, right? So you need to look at these variants, and these evolve over a period of time. It's not a static picture. So you need to stop it. This is something that needs to be nipped in the bud. If you let it linger around for too long, it'll balloon up to be a problem that eventually will sink the market, right? And there are two types of things you can do, two broad buckets of measures you can take. One on the operation side, on the process side, on the people side, and one on the technology side, right? And the technology side is evolving very quickly, but there are really, really simple practices that I want to share with you. And this is based on our conversations with the operators that are to the left end of the spectrum. They have really small shrink. They know how to run their business. And imitation, right, as they say, is the sincerest form of flattery. Why not learn from the best? And that's all I'm doing. I'm going to talk about three operations-related items. This is a tricky one, the first one. Building a shrink, a certain percentage of theft into the contract. So when you're having a customer sign a contract with you as an operator, have that open conversation and build a certain percentage, whether it's 3%, 5%, 7%, depending on the type of location, the type of crowd that uses that facilities. And believe it or not, executives are the worst offenders. That's where we see the highest levels of theft. I mean, there is a certain level of entitlement that comes with being an executive, I guess. This is a great strategy if you can pull it off, right? But if you're bidding for some business with a customer, there's more than one competitor in the area, and the customer might say, no, there's no way I'm letting you build that shrink into the contract, right? But there are some locations, there are some really big operators that do this as a standard business practice. So it's not unheard of. If you're dealing with a national account anywhere, I'm sure they heard about it from one of your competitors, right? This is a really interesting tactic. It's more of a leverage than anything else. Build an option into the contract to revert to vending, right? Most of the micro markets, a typical micro market is replacing vending machines, and this is not, again, something out of the ordinary that you're requesting. Several large operators bake this clause into the contracts. They say if micro markets are not working for you, if there is too much theft, if there are too many operational challenges, the facilities doesn't have the right power, it doesn't have the right connectivity, we'll revert back to vending. And customer, you have to have your skin in the game, and there are some penalty clauses and things of that nature that you can build into the contract. One thing real quick. We've seen this clause in the contracts, but I've never seen it being enforced. It's never really come into play. I mean, I'm sure you can all relate to it. Once you make the transition from vending to micro markets, people don't want to go back. They love micro markets, right? The last thing is more of a people issue. You have a variety of people that have access to the micro market, more from an administrative perspective, right? You have your route driver that's stocking it every day, every second day, depending on your schedules. You have the technicians that are going in to make some repairs as need be. You have the on-site contacts, whether it's the HR manager, facilities manager, or you might have somebody else playing that role for that site. So talk to them. Talk about theft. This is a reality of life in micro markets. It's not a huge problem, but it is a problem. And it's eating into your bottom line, right? So talk about it early, talk about it often, and make them aware of what their role is in all of this. Now, the technology part. In retail, just having a sign that says you're being watched, right? Those two eyes that haunt you when you go into a Walmart or a Target, right? So just having those signs, even if you don't have any video monitoring system, just having that sign is helpful. But of course, if you have a solid video monitoring system to back it, that's fantastic. Now, every person that's caught stealing in retail, right? Micro markets, any retail, not just micro markets. The first thing they say is I didn't do it, right? That doesn't change till you confront them with video evidence, saying, okay, that's you walking into the market, that's you taking the product, walking away without paying for it, or canceling but not putting the product back on the shelf, right? So, and that technology is changing. So imagine a micro market where you have a camera, it's recording every day, 24 hours a day. You realize there is some theft happening. So how do you go back in time and figure out who's stealing from you, right? Do you have the time, or do you have the staff to go through hours and hours of recordings to identify exactly when the theft occurred? You don't have to do that anymore, right? We are in 2019. There are companies out there that do this for you. In the new product zone, you should go check it out. There is a company called Panoptic. They're using artificial intelligence and cloud-based software. They are getting to a point where they can tell you exactly when the theft occurred and who took what, and they can give you that little snapshot of 2 minutes or 3 minutes that little video instead of you having to pour through hours and hours of DVR recordings, right? And I'm at 365. In our booth, we have the latest and the greatest offering that we have for DVR systems called March Networks. They have powerful technology that we are integrating with 365 kiosks. I'm sure our competition has something along those lines. What this integration does is the last category of people that I mentioned, the cancelers, people who pretend to buy but cancel at the last minute, that needs interaction between the eyes in the sky and the kiosk, right? So that integration, there is technology to make that happen. And then knowing what's in your market at any given point in time, that's the key, right? So how much inventory do you have? How much has been sold in a day? How much are you restocking? Basics, fundamentals, but you'll be surprised how many operators don't actually pay attention to it. You'll be surprised how many operators don't know what's the shrink in their market because they don't have reliable data, right? So technology providers like us, 365 and our competition, you should ask for our help. You should get these reports by default. And if your technology provider is not giving those reports to you, you should demand those reports from us, right? And then the last one, doing inspections. Now, this so far has been a very manual step, right? A route driver or technician does this. That's how it's been done traditionally. But there is technology that can do this for you, right? So with the March Networks, a product that we offer, you can take snapshots of your market at pre-scheduled intervals. You can say 8 a.m. Once the stocking is done, and let's say 8 p.m. once the that office closes down, right? So I want to see before and after. I could see 4 different snapshots of the market just to see what's going on, right? So if you have 20 markets, you have to go click through 40 pictures or 80 pictures, depending on what you want to do. It definitely beats having to drive to those 20 markets individually and having to take any preventive measures, right? So when you look at this footage, when you look at these pictures, you can quickly figure out, is it something that can wait for the route driver to get there next morning and fix? Or is this more imminent that I need to get in the car and go there myself, right? So 6 best practices that we've seen, and of course there are lots of other things you can do as well, right? I didn't want to bore you guys to death. Just wanted to share what's working, what's not working. Talk to us. I mean, we see it from our vantage point, whether it's Avanti or 365. From our vantage point, we see just about every use case that you can think of, just about every scenario that you can think of. And you don't have to solve this problem by yourself. Lean on us, talk to us, and we'll be happy to help, right? I chose that title because I met Mr. Frank Abagnale Jr., the main character of Catch Me If You Can, here in Vegas about 2 years ago. And he said a lot of interesting things. Of course, he worked for FBI after living that crazy life. And his main takeaway was thieves are always getting ahead of you. So it's not a one-time effort. You have to be constantly on your feet and constantly stay ahead of them, right? So there's no shortcuts to due diligence. There's no shortcuts to staying on top of everything that's going on in the market. And that's really the only way to stay ahead. Thank you, guys.